Welcome back, everybody, to Dream Chasers Ground Zero. Today, I have with us Brian Adams from Excelsior Capital. Brian, would you mind just sharing your story with us a little bit, telling us kind of how you got to where you are and what it was like for you when you were just getting started? And then to go with that, some of the things that you've had to learn and experience along the way that have helped you to get to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. So, brief background. I'm a New Yorker who married a Nashville girl. We met up in college. We both went to grad school up in the Northeast. I'm an attorney by trade. Moved to Nashville 15 years ago, and my wife's family has a single family office based here that has invested in commercial real estate and venture capital and private equity for the last 20, 30 years. So I didn't know what any of that was until I joined the family. And then I started getting exposure to some of the GPs and sponsors we were working with, funds we were investing in, et cetera, and became enamored with commercial real estate. And I saw a problem where my family, and our folks in our investing network had trouble accessing good kind of direct real estate opportunities. And they were always looking for something that would produce yield, even 10 years ago, passive income. And they really wanted managers and sponsors that were focused on working with taxable investors as opposed to some of these institutional groups that non-taxable and very inefficient in how they were managing money and investing capital. So I saw an opportunity in the marketplace and started our company 11 years ago now. And we can get into kind of the nitty gritty, but we invest in commercial real estate across secondary markets in the Southeast and the Midwest. For us, commercial can mean anything from office to flex to industrial to medical. And today we run about 2.7 million square feet. It's roughly $400 million portfolio, and we're in 14 markets at this point. And we've been pretty busy lately, so continuing to grow. I think your second question was how I got started. I think I covered that one. Lessons learned on the way. We don't have enough time probably to go over all the mistakes I've made. We can certainly focus on a few, but I'll start one off and we can kind of go from there. I think a big mistake I made was building the company initially, not realizing that in addition to doing the real estate investing itself, the infrastructure required to underpin those real estate investments required a lot of time and resources and energy to build out the marketing, the reporting, the investor relations, tax, audit, HR, all these things that don't really have to do directly with commercial real estate investing per se, but that if you don't have that small business bundled around the deals, no one really cares how great your deals are. It's going to be very challenging to have a successful business that you can scale efficiently. And so I don't think people appreciate, both on the GP sponsor side as well as the investor side, that you're really taking two risks. One is the real estate deals and the investments, and the other is that you're a small business owner, and small businesses in America tend to fail.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love to hear about your success so far. So, definitely congratulations on that. And one of the things I just want to kind of bounce back to is when you went through your story, you talked about how you noticed that gap in the market. And I kind of just want to hone in on that for a second and just kind of ask about, like, how were you able to kind of recognize that and realize that that was where you needed to shoot, that was where you needed to fit yourself in to create that business for yourself?
Yeah. So I actually do have a whole presentation about this that's free. You can go on the website or ping me and I'll send it to you. But it's about the right way to raise capital as a first-time entrepreneur, sponsor. And because I did it the wrong way for a long time, and I think a lot of people do it the wrong way. And I'll kind of summarize it by saying that many people in this business, especially, they try to raise capital by being ego-driven. And what I mean by that is they talk about how smart they are, how hard they work, how great the deal is they found, and they don't spend a lot of time being empathetic to what their investor base wants and being realistic with what their investor base can do. And so I think a mistake I made was just kind of cramming down these deals initially to my friends and family. But where I really started to pick up steam and scale the business, especially from a capital raising standpoint, was understanding the problems my investor base and my peer group had and offering them a solution set to those problems. And that was really a big pivot for the business. And what's allowed me to continue to grow is, servicing them in a way that addresses their needs and issues. And it's less about me and it's really more about them, if that makes sense. And I think in a roundabout way that answers your question.
Yeah, 100%. I know there's a lot that can be said about making sure that your product or your service is not necessarily perfect in your mind, but it's perfect in your consumer's mind. Who are you trying to add value to? It has to look good in their mind or they're not going to purchase it, whatever your product or your service looks like. And that's where like you just said, that you had to, a lot of people were raising capital the wrong way, and that you saw that, you noticed that, and then you were able to take your take and spin it to where, you started doing that the right way and you were able to find success doing it. That's where a lot of people, I feel like I see now doing that same thing. It's a lot of talking about yourself. It's a lot of talking about what you've accomplished, but it's not enough of talking about what your product is, how it's the right product for them, and how it's going to get them from where they are to where they want to go.
Right, exactly. So I think one of the things that we focus a lot here is we do three things fundamentally, right? We provide high net worth individuals and families access to direct deals that provide a double-digit or more cash on cash yield. And then we give them all the tax benefits that come from direct real estate ownership. Those are the three things that we do. Now, every deal may be a little bit different. Obviously, it's going to depend on the location, et cetera. But fundamentally, those are the foundations of what drives our investment thesis and the solutions that we're presenting to our network, because we know those are pain points that they have. And we're just trying to kind of solve them. And once we think about it from that lens and perspective, it's just a much easier conversation to have. And I think, going to the meeting and talking about what schools you went to and jobs you had, I don't think anybody really cares that much. And it's really kind of what's in it for them. And because we're in a service industry, right? We're delivering a product and an experience. And in my opinion, that's the right way to think about the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot can be said about showing your customer, whether that be an investor or, whatever your business may be, just that you've been in their shoes is a huge rapport builder, because it makes them feel comfortable with you and it makes them allow themselves to trust in you a little bit more. So you build that trust a little bit through your, letting them know you've been in their shoes. And that's where you realized your niche needed this. And that's not why they now need that same pivot to get out of their current situation to where they want to go. And that's where, it really just makes me kind of wonder about some of the other roadblocks or some of the other failures that you hit along the way, that you were able to kind of recognize things similar to that, where you were able to then find, even more success for yourself.
Yeah. Like I said, we don't probably have enough time in the whole hour to go through the mistakes I've made, but I think fundamentally the small business issue is one we addressed. How to raise capital efficiently is one we addressed. And the other is understanding that the investor experience is almost as important as the investments themselves, because to differentiate yourself in this business, in my opinion, you need to bring an institutional Wall Street type experience to a Main Street investor. And with technology, it's much more doable now than it was 5+ years ago. But I think there's no excuse now for not having best-in-class reporting, best-in-class investor relations, and best-in-class marketing. And one of the things that really differentiates us, that we focus a lot of time and energy on, is being a resource and a value add beyond just the investments themselves, right? So the networking, the referrals, the introductions, the content, the education, it's all part of that investor experience. And what you really want to do is build kind of a social community around your investment thesis and around your investment products, but that's holistic, so that people look to you as a thought leader, an industry expert, and can provide value beyond just this deal in Tulsa or West Palm Beach, et cetera. It has to be more than that. And I think investors expect more than that, and sponsors and GPs should be providing more than that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, I mean, your customers want to know that they're going to be taken care of. They want to know that you're going to take care of them. They want to know that your company is going to take care of them. And they want to know that you're going to be there to support them throughout the journey as well, not just in that one scenario where you need them and they need you. They want more of that. I'm trying to think of the right word, relationship than just the one-time deal. And I won't say that's for every case, but in many cases, that is something where they'd like to return, so they want to build more of a relationship there. So yeah, just kind of bouncing off of some of the what we've talked about so far is just what do you think, or what kind of advice do you think you'd give to someone? I mean, maybe such as myself or another young entrepreneur out there who's possibly thinking about trying to come into this space. What do you think that you'd tell them with the experience that you've built so far?
It's not for everyone. And I think many people go into this business wanting to be quote unquote deal guys. And I would really caution against that type of mindset and understand that you're going to have to mentally and emotionally cross the Rubicon and go all in on this idea. And it's going to take some time and effort, right? I think a big challenge that I definitely suffered under this impression for a long time is you think at some point the flip switches and you get access to the perfect investor or the right investor, and magically things become a lot easier, right? And that there's not necessarily a shortcut, but there's a solution that if you can find the right pathway will kind of speed up the development. But in reality, now looking back on it after 10 plus years, I realize that there's a process for a purpose, for a reason. You're supposed to go through those rejections, through those no's, through those hard conversations about how you can be setting up your firm, getting that feedback from your investors about what they expect, talking to other GPs and sponsors about what best in class operators are doing. It takes time, right? And it's iterative, and there's no end game. Like the rabbit hole runs deep. You can always be doing something a little bit better. You should always be experimenting. I think for a long time I thought, oh, when I get to this AUM or this square footage, this many employees, I'll have quote unquote made it. And now, and which I think you'll realize, or at least I did for me, when you hit those benchmarks, they'll actually be pretty dark days because you realize you just made those numbers up in your head and nothing fundamentally changes when you hit those goalposts. And what you should be focused on instead are creating systems and processes that can allow your company to scale efficiently. And you should be documenting them and always improving on them. But it's not about whatever, number that you put up. It's more about creating a company that can sustainably grow. And I talk about oftentimes in this business, and I think many businesses that are in the service-oriented industry, you want to be the Blue Man Group and not Siegfried and Roy. So when Siegfried and Roy is on stage, they're great. People love them. They're making money. It's wonderful. They're the talent. But when one of them gets their throat torn out by a tiger, the show's over. And you can't replicate Siegfried and Roy without them. And they're only performing and only making money when they're performing. Whereas the Blue Man Group can have 20 different shows going on simultaneously, and everyone's having a great time. Everyone's having a good experience. You're making money. The fans are enjoying it. And that's a system that's repeatable. And I think that was a fundamental shift in my mindset that happened probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That was a lot to throw at you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm processing, but I like it though, because I think it's important that you're able to come in with the right goals in mind, because then otherwise you'll hit those and then you'll realize, well, what did that really get me? So, I mean, do you just kind of have any more to elaborate on that, just to kind of make sure that you're setting the right goals where you do have like a target to aim for, but one that means something, and that by hitting that is actually, you know, it like I'm trying to think of a right analogy or something like like that you're actually going to get that fulfillment out of.
Yeah. So I would think about less about square footage or AOM or dollar figures or headcount necessarily. And I would think about, okay, what goals can I hit that allow me to take things off my plate that aren't the highest and best use to create value for the enterprise and my investors, right? So I understand it's a capital intensive business. It's really hard to start unless you have that capital to get things off the ground. But as you grow through acquisitions, and the fees start coming in, really start thinking about, okay, is the highest and best use for me and for the enterprise and for my investors to be spending time on bookkeeping? Probably not. Asset management, leasing, tax, audit. Once you get to a point where you can delegate some of that work, do it, and then move on to what you think is kind of highest and best use for your time. And I think it's very difficult because oftentimes people are very driven, alpha-oriented sponsor entrepreneurs that can have a tendency to micromanage. But you've really got to push through that mindset because you just won't be able to grow efficiently that way.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree. So, I mean, one of the things that I think of is just kind of, what do you think would be a good habit for young entrepreneurs, or even, young individuals interested in getting to the real estate space, to start building up now? Or to kind of segue off of that, where do you think are some good resources for young people such as myself to start paying attention to be learning about these things?
It seems cliche and hackneyed, but you are really only as good as your network. And you need to be spending, I mean, I probably spend more time networking now than I did when I first got into business, which is crazy because I thought I did a lot of networking back in the day. But deal flow, investors, best practices, surrounding yourself with people that are taking things to the next level. And I think you'd be really surprised if you just reach out and you say, hey, like, I've noticed you on LinkedIn, would really love to get 15 minutes of your time. After you drop your kids off in the morning, can I just steal 10 minutes in the car and hear your story, ask you some questions to get some help? I mean, most people in this business want to help. They want to see other people really succeed. But you need to be thoughtful about maintaining that network over a long time. And that's also a great way to kind of pre-market and preset your investor base by reaching out, using 2 ears instead of one mouth, and listening to what they want, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, what their problems are. It's never too early to start that. And all you do is kind of have a continuum, right? Where I've been doing this 10 years. I'm clearly going to try to network with folks that have been doing it for 20 years because they can teach me a ton. And I, to the extent I can, try to get as much time on their calendars as I possibly can, but also paying it forward. I think oftentimes people who are new in the business or maybe younger, they think they have no value that they can provide to other people that have been doing this for a while. And I think if you just kind of say, hey, is there anything I can do to help you right now? Like, I think you'd be surprised by the answer, because oftentimes someone will say, yeah, actually, I'm really struggling with this, or I need to find somebody here. Do you happen to know somebody? And to the extent you can pay that forward and start building that karma, I mean, it's just such a powerful energy. And what's really cool about what's happening now, and COVID has reinforced this, with social media and content creation and education, it's all kind of out there, right? Like, you can learn for free. You can reach out to almost anybody. You can have this incredibly diverse network without having to leave your house necessarily. And all it takes is just time, right? It doesn't take a lot of money, but it does take time. So I'd really encourage people to be organized and thoughtful and judicious about carving out 10, 15, 20 hours a week, improving their network, talking to other people, and really listening to what they have to say.
100%. 100%. I cannot vouch enough for networking. I mean, I know I've mentioned it before. on the air before, but I mean, even in my personal situation, like, I'm trying to think of how I want to word it. Like when I got with Adam, he was really the first person that exposed me to commercial real estate or anything like that. So he was the first person that I was asking questions about it, anything like that. And really, like, I didn't know kind of what I was doing at first, but I was still able to say, like, wow, obviously you know a lot more information about this than I do. Is there anything that I can do for you that in turn you can help me gain more of an understanding about this? And that's where really our relationship kind of started, is that he was like, wow, I didn't think about it, but I could use some help doing X. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to learn how to do that. Like, let's do it. And then in turn, I was able to offer, you know, my help, just in turn for him to help me learn the right information and just gain more of an understanding about this topic that I wanted to learn more about. So, just building up relationships like that. And then, like you said, in terms of referrals or anything like that, like obviously Adam has a massive network. That's how we met. That's how, I've met numerous other, individuals. And not one time, I mean, even before getting connections from him, was I ever turned down for a call to ask somebody for some advice or, just their input on or their story, or just asking to learn from them. So just like you said, I can't vouch enough for networking, and don't be scared to reach out to people, because there really are a lot more people out there than anybody realizes that want to help you, and they want to help you grow. And, if not even just yourself, that they want to see more young people grow and succeed in, their respective industries.
Yeah, I mean, I can't reinforce this enough. I got to know Hunter, and then I got turned into Adam, and I pitched him to be a guest on the show. And he was like, hey, actually, I've got a friend, a colleague who's starting up a new show. Let's get you on there. So that email turned into an introduction to you. And now I'm on your show. And now we've connected. And all it took was like 5 minutes of emailing. And now I've got somebody that I know in the industry. And it's like, hopefully we can do business together, help each other. There's a really cool story recently. Endeavor, which is a big media company that owns UFC and all these cool other enterprises. Elon Musk is on the board, and Ari Emanuel, who is the CEO of Endeavor, they asked him, well, how did you get Elon on your board? That's pretty cool. And Ari said, well, I just cold called him. Like, if you think these people who are running the show have these like great networks just by coincidence, you're dead wrong. Like, they work at it, and they get told no a lot, but sometimes they get told yes, right? I mean, you got to put yourself out there. And the only downside is somebody doesn't respond or they say no. Like, who cares? Most people are going to say yes, or, just like, there's no downside, right? Just spending 10, 15 minutes on the phone with somebody. You never know where it's going to lead. And I often hear about discipline, the power of no, and sure, you need to get your work done. But like, I'm a big fan of the power of yes. It's always been good to me. So I'd encourage younger people to have that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I kind of want to touch on one of the points you just made, is that one thing that I've realized is that, like, once I obviously was connected with Adam, my mentor, I felt more comfortable then reaching out to other people, because I was able to say, like, hey, my name is Aaron. I am an intern for Adam, and like, all you really need is one connection like that. You need one person to think you're cool for all the other kids to think you're cool, and all of a sudden you're in the gang and you get to meet all these new people just because one person said you were all right. So really, like, the power of one connection is astounding, but at the same time, like, it's not as big of a leap as a lot of people think it is. They'll come in and they're so nervous about reaching out to somebody, but it's really, all in all, like, think of it like a conversation, because that's really what it is. You're just coming in, you're going to ask them about their story, or whatever else, you might have in mind. But I would advise you just ask about their story, and then ask in what ways you can learn from them. And, like you mentioned earlier, be thoughtful and be courteous. I'd say being courteous is one of the most, what's the word, looked for skills now over anything. Like, it's rare that people say thank you anymore. It's rare that people actually, make it known that they're grateful for an experience or for whatever that may be. So if you want to make yourself stand out, follow up and just be courteous. Like that's really,
I cannot emphasize that point enough. I was talking to, Jerome Myers.
not
He's
personally.
he's big on LinkedIn. He's a great guy. We were talking about this yesterday. Every time that somebody comes on my show or I do a webinar with me or I'm on their show, like after this, I'm going to ask you for your address. I send them a handwritten note and a piece of swag. And sure, it costs some money, but like, I think it's just the reasonable thing to do. And I think it's the courteous thing to do. I think it's polite. I mean, I was a guest on your show. You're doing something nice for me and you're allowing me to reach out to your network. That's meaningful. And that's a pretty small thing, right? Like you think, oh God, it takes 2 minutes to write a note, go to UPS, do 10 a week, whatever. You will be automatically a top 1% guest on any show you do because so few people do it. It doesn't take a lot these days. And going a little bit extra mile, and Jerome asked me, like, well, why do you do that? Like, well, one, I think it's polite, but two, now I've got a network of 100 podcasters who they think of me every day when they drink their coffee in the morning. And when I need something, or if I go on a media campaign or I do a book or a new whatever, they're probably going to say yes, right? Like it just took a little bit of time and a little bit of thoughtfulness. It's not hard, but it goes a long way.
Absolutely. And I'm actually really glad you mentioned that because that is one of the things that I've started doing is handwritten notes. And I've been working on the swag part. It's something that I wanted to incorporate, but I haven't really found the right way that I want to start doing that yet. But I have been doing the handwritten notes. And yeah, just like you said, I mean, there's a lot of young professionals out there that really just kind of struggle with the fact that how do I differentiate myself from everybody else on paper or whatever it is. Well, something as simple as meeting with somebody and sending them a handwritten note is they're going to remember your face. They're going to remember your name because nobody's doing that. And like you said, it takes a couple minutes, but it's something that's really going to set you apart from everybody else by leaps and bounds. But it's something so simple that just nobody does anymore.
Yeah, and that extends to your investor relations experience, to sales, to marketing. I mean, going the extra mile, to use another cliche, you're never going to regret it, right? And I think increasingly as this world becomes more competitive, people becoming sponsors, syndicating, that white glove experience makes all the difference in the world. And I want to echo something else you mentioned, which is, the courteous thing and the mindfulness. If you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money. So when you're building your network and you're pre-marketing your investor group, don't just hard pitch them, because that just is rude, I think, and it's not very effective. But if you ask for advice, most people are going to be flattered. Most people will take the time. And if you actually listen to what you have to say and you stay in touch, you follow up thoughtfully, you're thoughtfully persistent, it will lead to a conversation about investing. And that is far and away the most effective, best way to do it. So definitely encourage people to go that route. And I think people are always willing to open up the door for the most part. But if you just do a little bit of homework and you approach it and frame the conversation the right way, offer to be a resource for them, and then follow up, that alone will make you a top 1% networker in the world. Most people just don't do it. Like just some bot email response on LinkedIn, like, come on, you can do better than that.
Yeah.
This concludes my TED talk, but
No, that's all right. I'm actually really glad that you mentioned that because that is kind of what I was getting at earlier when I said, when you reach out to somebody, I'd advise that you just ask how you can learn from them and get advice from them because yeah, like you mentioned, you don't just want to come in and start pitching somebody on, either what it is you've done, whether that be your job experience or whatever. Like, don't just come in and say like, hey, I'm so-and-so and I want an internship. Like that's not going to work. They might hang up the phone. Like that's a waste of time for both of you. Don't do that. I promise you it's not going to work. But if you come in thoughtfully and you ask about their experience and how you can learn from them, and if you can have some advice, that's much more meaningful to them. It's much more courteous. It's going to stick in their brain longer and it looks better on you. And honestly, You don't know it, but they're probably going to tell people about you behind your back. They're probably going to tell colleagues about, oh, I met with this kid and, he honestly just wanted to hear from me about my story and wanted to learn from me. And it's so rare anymore that people in the industry do talk about that because nobody does it anymore. And there's just, like we've talked about today, numerous different ways that you can honestly start differentiating yourself, and it doesn't take an extensive amount of work.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, in saying that, I think it's about time for us to start winding it down here. I mean, and just in closing, I mean, there's been a lot of good stuff in terms of networking advice today. I mean, and just, it's so hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that it's this easy, but nobody does it. And I don't really like, because even like we call it going the extra mile, but you do not even have to go a mile. Like
Yeah.
you don't like the extra work that you have to put in to stand out is really not enough what's the word? Okay, I can't think of it. It's not enough to match up with the numbers that nobody does it. It doesn't make sense for all the more work that you have to do.
Yeah. And the reality is, I think COVID and 2008, because I worked through both, when the chips are down and things are going sideways on you, you're really only good as your network. And if you've only been a taker and you haven't been a giver and you haven't built legitimate relationships, it's going to be hard. Like, life doesn't have to be that hard. And you can meet some incredible people and have some really powerful relationships by just putting yourself out there a little bit and not being a jerk. It's not super complicated, but pretty tough, apparently, for a lot of people to do. So,
yeah, I mean, one last thing, if anybody takes anything away from today, it's give. Just no matter what you do, give. Whether it's your attention, whether it's your courteousness, whether it's, your gratitude, give. No matter how much you give, eventually it will come back to you. And, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, but eventually you giving in terms of gratitude or your attention or whatever that may be is going to come back to you in terms like that. Like, because if things hit the fan per se and you were a giver, someone's going to be much more welcoming to come back and try to help you out of whatever situation that is. And if you're a giver to 200 people, then you have a huge base of people that are going to be able to help you from whatever situation that is. And I can't really think of one off the top of my head that 200 people wouldn't be able to help you out of.
yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
But yeah, man, I mean, I feel like if I keep going, we're just going to keep talking about the same points here at this point, because it really is just kind of, driving those ones home. But do you have any, final thoughts for everybody, just kind of around everything that we talked about today, just kind of before we close it out?
Yeah, I'll just offer it up. If anybody wants to talk, get some advice, connect, whatever I can do to help, make introductions, referrals, find time on the calendar to chat, be a resource for you. I'm really active on LinkedIn. That's how I met Dan originally. So look me up, Brian Adams, Excelsior Capital. If you want to go to the website, we've got a bunch of really good content that's obviously free under the resources tab at excelsiorgp.com. And I encourage you to reach out. Let me know how I can help. And thanks for having me on the show, Aaron. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a ton of success here.
Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate you coming on and just sharing your story and your experience. I mean, and you heard it here first, folks. Fortune's in the follow-up. Hit Brian up, whatever questions you have. There are people out there that want to help you and that want to be a resource for you. Quit being afraid to reach out. Go get it done. All right. And, with that, everybody remember, this is Dream Chasers Ground Zero, and there's nowhere to go from here but up.